And what we're going to do now is we're going to show how you can use the Terraform provider for Tanzu Mission Control and do things like create clusters, create groups of clusters, for example. And we just got a question there if you want to look at that. And the questions there, Corey, will dive into this. So this is Tanzu Mission Control. We've seen this already. I'm using the white version versus the dark mode. You got 2 modes you can choose from, right? I have a cluster group called Rogers Demo Clusters. And you can see here I've got a couple of clusters I created a while ago just for this Bright Talk webinar. And I did that using Terraform. So it looks a lot like this. So if I go over to my Terraform file, you know, you can get all this. This is an example taken from the Terraform website. It's in the registry, and you can and just kind of customize the things that are specific to my environment. Things like what I want my cluster to be named, and things like my subnets and so forth, or subnet IDs, and the things that are specific to my environment you would configure for your environment as well. But once you get that configured, you can simply just run a Terraform apply, and what'll happen is it'll run for a period of time. There we go. So I'm passing a couple of different Terraform variable files. Some that have different types of secrets, like my ARNs, for example, for EKS, or my.
We're trying not to give everyone our public keys, right?
Right. Try not to. Trying to avoid that.
No Bitcoin miners on our environment, please.
That's right. And things like my VMware Tanzu API key that lets me communicate with Tanzu Mission Control, right? But I run that apply. Now, I've already done that here. I haven't changed anything. So Terraform should tell me there's nothing to do if I did it right. Yep, so nothing's changed, right? So we created some stuff earlier. But now, how can we do things with this provider and show what that looks like? Oh, by the way, when I ran this earlier, I'm not going to run a full cluster create. I'm going to show what it looks like, though, because if I run one here, it takes a while to finish. So let me just show what that looks like. I ran it earlier in my environment. You can see here, it took about 17 minutes to complete, right? So that's how long Terraform had control of the process. And there were still a few things that had to settle kind of behind the scenes. But let's see what we could do with that. So if I wanted to, I could go into my TF file here, and I could change the number of nodes in my node pool, right? My default node pool, I could make that 3 or 5 or 1, run an apply, and we'd see that update happen. Or more interesting, maybe I want to add capacity. Maybe I want to go over to where I'm naming my clusters, right? And here I'm just using one of the Terraform kind of little tricks to do an array of things, right? Let's say I want to add a cluster real time here. I can just go ahead and change that. Go back to my command line, rerun my apply.
And Scott, this is kind of where, we come into being able to train other team members, right, to do this type of thing where, like, they don't need to be terribly skilled to say, oh, we need to add in capacity. This is our run book, add in another cluster, and everything else is kind of done for you, right?
Right. And let me just do this. All right, so now you see Terraform is going to tell us that there is a plan to add one. If I just kind of back up here, you can see it's going to add the cluster we just named. There we go. That's the cluster it wants to add, which is Bright Talk 03. Let's go ahead and say yes. We kick that off. And as we saw, it's probably going to take about 15 minutes to complete because it's going to communicate with Tanzu Mission Control, which will then provision that on EKS for us. And prior to this, there's a few things we had to do. We had to create a credential in Tanzu Mission Control that has access to our EKS environment, right? There's some things you have to do, but those are things you do anyway, right?
Create a VPC.
Yeah. Yep.
And this works. This process will work on private VPCs. It'll work on public VPCs, public and private.
Yep. And when it gets done, you can see what I showed this a minute ago is what it will look like. And we even though it's still running as we're having this conversation, if I go back to Tanzu Mission Control and just refresh my view, I'm going to see that new cluster is under creation right now. And if I were to go over to my EKS account, I would also see it there. If I did not think to log back in, my authentication is still good. Oh, it is. Look at that. So you can see it's being created right now live as we speak, right? Yep. It'll take a little while for all the pieces and parts to download and happen, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like
refresh
that.
my screen here.
Like, if
That's
I was
awesome,
still
right?
having to train team members to, do things depending on your environment, right? Like, obviously, we could have done that through the GUI, but it just depends on what your workflow looks like and your needs as an organization.
Right. In this case, I'm adding one cluster, so you could go through the GUI just as easily. But if I want to create, a series of clusters all at one time, you can do that too with the Terraform provider. The same way I could create all 3 or all 5, and I could create it in EKS in TKG on-prem, right? It doesn't really matter. And I could do all those things at one time with one Terraform script if I want to go to that route. And the idea behind the GitHub repo and the scripts, you can see, we've talked about this. It really isn't to demonstrate how to build how to build your CI/CD pipeline. It's about showing what you can do with the tools, right, to kind of get to the pipeline you need for your environment. Um, I think that's super cool that you can do that. And I also want to show, if you don't mind, kind of jump into how you can also manage policies as well.
Please, because that's again another that's the biggest one of the bigger pain points we hear is, how do we manage policies for all these different things in all these different places? And some people
Yeah.
may not
So
have all those environments, but, you know, similar issues.
right. And so Corey's provided these different policies we can use, right? So you can see they're named different things. You can um, PSP disabled. You can create IAM uh, identities, roles, service accounts, basically, right?
Yep.
And so if you go to the GitHub repo and you actually download it or clone it, you'll say there's an example subdirectory. We'll have grouped just 2 of those things together, so we can actually see what that looks like. Nope. Right. So we're gonna really just do 2 things. We're going to apply IAM roles, and we're going to run the PSP disabled Terraform script as well. Right. So let's do the same thing at Terraform apply. It's a little simpler one because we're just pulling in one secrets file. Kick it off, and if I go back and look, you can see that there's 18 discrete different things that Terraform is going to do right on a couple of our clusters between adding the roles and the security. Run type yes. This actually executes pretty quickly, and we can see it'll finish here momentarily. Then we can go into Tanzu Mission Control in the GUI and see where these things just happened. Let's go look at that now. Right.
And this is
So
great
good.
because, again, you don't have to always rely on, going through and I guess updating things through the GUI. This is something that you can have in a structured file that is source tracked and controlled so that you always definitely know, who's made changes or where you may have broke things. And it's an easy kind of rollback effort from that perspective.
Right. That's exactly right. That's huge. And the Terraform files I just ran targeted 2 clusters, 2 cluster groups, both of these in and -tf. So I only applied to these 2 cluster groups. And something that Corey clued me into just this week, which was kind of an aha moment for me, that I think is really cool, is that I created security policies. You can see this policy here, and I can go back now and destroy those from a Terraform perspective, and then this goes away, or I could delete it here, whatever you want to do. But the idea is I just created this policy moments ago here live in this webinar. But the cool thing is I did not have to have a cluster in the cluster group to do that. So I can set my policies for the cluster group, and then as I onboard clusters to that group, those policies get applied. That's huge because in addition to being able to manage your security policies as code, as Corey just described, you can do that without actually having the clusters there. I think that's a pretty neat idea concept, right? That you can do
You
that.
lay down the infrastructure or at least the components that govern it, right? And as you start transitioning into this new environment, things are set up for you, things are ready to go. And you're going to be able to have an environment that's much closer of a replication to your production environment without, you know, running into issues that you're surprised by. Like, oh, whoops, we didn't realize we needed to have this, run as user in here defined, things like that.